It's a good question, really, and it's something we looked at last year, really, with an Italian doctor who was working with us, Margherita De Mauro, and we found this. Again, it relates to, really, it was a question that whether sex is important, really, and it does. There is quite a statistically significant difference, and very broadly, with sickle cell disease, then women do better than men, and men in general have more complications and shorter lives, and and women tend to have the opposite. They have fewer complications and have a longer life expectancy. I mean, that's true of life in general. Whether you have or haven't got sickle cell disease, those two things are broadly true. In sickle, it's difficult to work out exactly what's going on. Men with sickle cell disease and without have higher hemoglobin levels than women. And in general, that higher hemoglobin levels in sickle are generally associated with better outcomes. Not entirely so, and the fact that men have more problems than women, it kind of illustrates that a bit. Men have more, although they have higher hemoglobin levels, then they tended to also have higher transcranial Doppler velocities, which is a measure of cerebrovascular disease. And in general, in the population as a whole, there's an inverse relationship between that if you have a higher hemoglobin, you have a lower TCD. So in men, it's slightly counterintuitive that having a higher hemoglobin would give you a higher risk of cerebrovascular disease, but it seems to. So we've looked at it, and again, with all things, there are more questions than answers, really. But there is a difference, and some of it is genetic. Well, I guess all of it is probably genetic. Some of it, or most of it, some of it might be social, and there are different factors involved, and the way men, for example, are treated in A&E is very different to women, and the way people interpret symptoms in men is very different to how they're interpreted in women, and some of it may be related to that, but there are some fairly hard biological differences between men and women with sickle cell disease and without, but particularly with sickle cell disease. Hemoglobin F as well is higher in women, which is probably maybe a source of quite a lot of the differences and why sickle outcomes are better. And why the F level is higher in women, again, is not entirely clear. There are possibly factors on the X chromosomes that have been identified that promote hemoglobin F, and that may be a factor. But again, I think it was a useful thing to look at it. But the other part of your question, in practice, in terms of interpreting outcomes in studies, then it is a factor, really. And if you have a particular study where one group or other is very biased in terms of men or women, then that could potentially alter the outcome. In general, studies clinical studies don't stratify, so you have equal numbers of men and women in each arm. That tends to happen naturally, but it could be a factor. And I guess the other thing, if we could understand exactly what the difference is, that may be a way of treating men so that they have fewer problems. It may reveal therapeutic information.